Hello. I'm going to talk a little bit about suicide. I've been thinking about suicide the last couple days. Not my own suicide, but just thinking about it in general. And I kind of went on a little bit of a Twitter rant last night about suicide and stigma. So I'm going to use some of those notes from last night, some of my tweets, as a way to structure a little bit of a talk here about suicide. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is my own relationship with suicide. Suicide is something that I have been interested in as a subject matter since I was a little kid. I would select books at the bookstore that my parents would pay for, and therefore that they knew I was buying, about suicide, and read every page of every book I could find. It was just a mysterious topic to me. I found it amazing that people would or could do that. I still find it to be a very, in a way it's a very brave thing to do. I remember hearing a story reading a story in National Geographic about a mountain climber who committed suicide, but the way he did it, he didn't just fall off of a ledge, he got a running start off of a ledge. And that story still amazes me, that someone would want to die so much that they could get a running start off of a ledge and plummet to their death. You can say suicide is cowardly, and I don't know. I see it more as a very brave thing to do. It's a very scary thing to do. I think it can be cowardly, and I think it's, it doesn't have nearly the mystery for me or the romanticism that it did as a child now. I don't view it as a romantic thing anymore. I don't view it as in any way a glamorous thing. I view it as something that people do when they are hurting so much that that's becomes a rational choice. So, on my own suicide attempt, I made one suicide attempt. I felt suicidal many times since around the 10th grade, I think. And only once when I was in my early 30s or early to mid 30s did I attempt suicide by overdose of pills. I was kind of in and out of hospital programs in Vermont and feeling very lonely. I didn't have any family around. I didn't have friends to support me. I was feeling very disconnected, and I was also depressed. I have bipolar disorder, as you may know if you follow my channel, and that's the perspective from which I can speak about suicide the most. Other mental illnesses have suicidal tendencies associated with them, and people kill themselves for reasons not associated with mental illness, although it's very rare. I'll talk about that more a little bit later. But yeah, I was in and out of hospital programs. It was late one night. I had gotten out of one of my outpatient programs where I was kind of come to find out later from some of the people who ran the program, acting out and acting weirdly. And I had this bottle of pills. I knew I was going to take it. And I didn't stop myself. I could have, and I thought about giving that bottle of pills to the secretary who worked there at night and saying, "I'm not safe with this medicine. Can you keep it for me?" I'm sure they would have put me in the hospital right away if I had done that. Although at the time I wasn't really concerned with whether I was in the hospital or not. I just wanted to die. I wanted to get rid of, the feelings I was having, and I just felt so low. In bipolar sadness and depression, there's no reason for the way you feel the way you do, except the way your brain is fluctuating. You're depressed. It's not like you have a reason. So a lot of people who aren't bipolar or don't understand mental illness or bipolar they think that, they immediately, the first thing that they do when they see you crying is ask what's wrong. And with bipolar depression, there might not be anything wrong. It might just be that you're depressed because you're depressed, because your brain is depressed. So it doesn't work the same way that normal people's emotion and kind of normal moderate fluctuations of emotion work, where there's a reason you're having a bad day, and that reason either continues and you do something about it, or you don't, or it goes away, but as I understand it, there's a lot more sensibility in people's emotion who don't have bipolar disorder. They can make sense of their emotions. There are reasons why things happen. In a bipolar mind, there aren't reasons except the mind itself. Often, why one feels a certain way. It's not like you're manic because you're getting married, or manic because your sister's having a birthday, or manic because you just got laid. You're just manic. You're just fucking manic. And it's the same thing with being depressed. There's no reason that you wanted to kill yourself. It's just you were depressed. You felt life was pointless. And a lot of those feelings of pointless and futility and hopelessness, they are not thoughts arrived at rationally. They're thoughts arrived at because of your brain and the brain chemistry that's going on there, which is, of course, totally out of your control, except through medicine and maybe some biometric methods too. So anyway, I took this bottle of pills and immediately told a security guard who was around that I did so, because I didn't, in that suicide attempt, want to die. I wanted to be taken seriously. There was an obsessive compulsive point of view or perspective or aspect to my suicide, wherein I was obsessed with the idea of taking these pills and compulsively took them. There was a bipolar depression aspect of my suicide attempt, wherein I felt life was futile and I didn't see a way to possibly go on. I didn't see a way to take a next step into life. And, oh shoot, what was the other aspect that I was just talking about? Oh yeah, there's this need to be taken seriously aspect. I needed my parents to take seriously the fact that things were not going well for me. Now, other communication methods had failed, especially with my father, and this was not a communication method that I recommend to anyone. Certainly not a good way to make a point, but probably more common than we'd like. A way to make a point, a way to say, hey, things are not going well here. Can you please take me seriously? Things are going so bad that I'm ready to end my life. And I was ready to end my life. I didn't think I would die after the overdose that I took, but I had accepted that possibility if it were to happen. So that's kind of where I came out on my particular suicide attempt. And what else do we have here? I think, one of the primary things I think about suicide is, and maybe this is going to sound Pollyanna, and maybe it's going to sound obvious, but it's definitely one of the things that I really think would be better, is I think it would be better if there was less stigma around talking about it. In my family, there's stigma around talking about my suicide attempt, although maybe not as bad, as it could be, or it might be in other families. But it's this, it is still, in a lot of circles, a hushed subject, and a subject that is not talked about openly, because it's not understood and it's scary, and it's people still have unanswered questions about it. When normal people think about suicide, it's like this mysterious thing. There's a mystery of why someone would ever want to do that, quote unquote want to do that. And so the person who commits suicide or attempts suicide, part of how they're perceived by normal people is as this, they have this very abnormal kind of psychology that other people don't understand. How could you ever feel like that? How could you ever go against the kind of basic moral code that says that life is, that your life is valuable? And there's this, I think there are religious, kind of pseudo-religious ideas that are that misunderstand suicide. I feel that in my family, this sort of pseudo-religious, like, if you were with God, you wouldn't be, if you were right with God, you wouldn't be feeling this way, or this is going against God, so how could you possibly go against God? It's not even about anymore what you need to do for yourself. It's that you're going against this moralistic code. But I think that, part of the reason that it's valuable for there to be less stigma against talking about suicide is because the points at which people who are suicidal talk about it, talk about their desires and plans, that's the point at which we can help them. The more it's kept quiet and the more it's not allowed to be talked about, and the more afraid people are to talk about it with their parents because their parents won't understand or whatever reason, the more it happens because people's plans and desires go unchecked. Whereas when and if there was more talking about suicide, when a person is thinking about it, I think that it would create more opportunities for people to be stopped, to be helped, to be given another chance to spend a week in a psychiatric hospital or more, and maybe after that week the person still kills themselves, but maybe they don't. It creates that little extra chance that the person might reconsider living a longer life. I used to think in my very non-suicidal phases, I used to think of it like, I wouldn't kill myself because basically we're all going to die pretty soon anyway. Life is short, life is suffering, life is tragic, among other things. It's certainly those things. But why short circuit the suffering? Because it's going to end, quicker than we know anyway. That's certainly an idea that I've had about suicide. But I've also been in the states where I felt strongly about ending it sooner rather than later. I think one of the things that happens in at least bipolar suicide and bipolar suicidality is the person ends up feeling ashamed of something they have no control over. Bipolar has ups and downs that the patient or sufferer, or however you want to say it, is not in control of. And, the downside includes suicidality often as an element. So you have this illness where, as a course of the illness, you may feel suicidal. It's totally not of your doing. It's not your fault. And it's not even necessarily something you want to feel. Bipolar people don't want to be depressed. They may want to be manic, or they may not, but they do not want to be depressed. It's a terrible state, It's a terrible, terrible state. And, and this stigma makes it so that bipolar people are feeling ashamed of something that they don't have any control over. I just don't think that's right. I don't think that, we should put that on each other. One doctor told me, one of my early doctors, when I was feeling suicidal, before I was ever diagnosed with bipolar disorder, he told me that all animals, once they feel below a certain level of okayness, want to die. That even a dog, when it's in a certain level of suffering and pain, it wants to die. I don't know how he knew this. I don't even know if it's true, but I think it makes sense, to not feel so bad about that. It's like, yes, if you are depressed below a certain level, you are going to want to die, and it's natural to want to die. It's not easy for people who are normal, who have normal brain chemistry, to understand that, because they've never experienced feeling that low. They've never had the experience of feeling so low that it's natural to want to die, because their brain chemistry maintains at a fairly stable level. But it's certainly not fair to take people who, because of their brain chemistry, feel so low that it's natural for them to want to die, to feel bad about that. I don't feel bad about that at this point. I don't think we should tolerate people who, and the idea that, that you should feel bad about that you should feel ashamed of that, because it's something you have no control over. One psychiatrist that I went to suggested, and I really liked the suggestion, that he said you as a bipolar patient should treat suicidal thoughts as a heart patient treats chest pains, i.e. go to the fucking hospital. A chest pain to a heart patient is a sign that something is very, very, and possibly fatally wrong. And at that point of feeling those chest pains, you should go to the fucking hospital. And he said to me I should consider suicidal thoughts the same way. And I don't know if that was before. No, that was after my suicide attempt that he said that to me. So, I certainly, as somebody who has had, as someone who has had suicidal thoughts for a large part of my life, and then has had one experience of attempting suicide, I can no longer view my suicidal thoughts as idle thoughts, as necessarily idle thoughts. For the long time I thought, okay, I have these thoughts, but I'll never act on them. I have these thoughts, but I would never actually do that. And it took a bipolar depression and some situational things going on in my life to get to a point where, and OCD, it took OCD as well, to get to a point where those suicidal thoughts became suicidal actions in my case. And so I personally do not have the luxury anymore of taking suicidal thoughts in any way lightly. I can't logically, given what I've been through, I cannot logically say, oh, it's just a suicidal thought. It'll probably go away. I don't need to worry about it. No. I've been through one suicide attempt. I know damn well that those suicidal thoughts can turn into suicidal actions, which can turn into suicide, which is undoable, and shortens my already probably short life on this planet, So I really like that he said that about chest pains and suicidal thoughts and heart patients and bipolar patients. It's like, as a bipolar patient, as a depression patient, as a mental illness, as, a patient of several different types of mental illnesses that have suicidality associated with them, it's important that you take your suicidal thoughts seriously. Those thoughts can turn into actions. Be careful with yourself. You're not in control all the time of what you're doing. And I guess just the last thing I'll end on is a statistic I heard, which I'm probably misquoting. If I can, I'll find the YouTube video link that I saw this in, so that I'm backing this up. So the statistic may not actually be, 100% accurate, but the number was something very much like this, which was I saw a psychiatrist on YouTube talking about mental illness and suicide, and he had done a study or seen a study that said that something like 94% of suicides are associated with a major mental illness. And, when I heard that statistic, it's like my heart goes out. It's not just that people are out there killing themselves for no reason. Most people who kill themselves have something wrong with their brain. We have something wrong with our brain. It's some type of mental illness that causes us to feel especially low or to feel especially abnormal, whether it be through the mood switches of bipolar disorder or the abnormality of being out of sync with the world that you feel with schizophrenia. People who kill themselves, according to this study, by and large, have a major mental illness. And I guess I'll leave you with that. Thank you for listening to my thoughts on suicide. If you're thinking about doing it, please don't. Please give yourself another day or another minute or another week to think about it. Because, we go through fluctuations, and you will probably feel different later if you decide not to do it. Does it mean that your thoughts and your desires didn't make sense at the time, that they weren't warranted? No, it doesn't mean that. Life is very hard, and especially if you have a mental illness, life, thoughts of emotion and existence and things like that are especially hard when you have a mental illness, because your brain is just not working the normal way. It's not working the easy way. So I definitely, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but if you're thinking about killing yourself, I would hold off for as much time as you can, even if it's just a minute. Give yourself another hour to think about it. Do something else for an hour. And then say, I've done this to myself. Like, sometimes I've said to myself, I really want to go to the bathtub and cut myself, and kill myself right now. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to read a book instead. I'm going to get in the bath. I'm going to read a book for an hour, and I'm going to give myself that extra time to think about it. But ultimately, if you're feeling suicidal, waiting around isn't even the best idea. It's just better than doing it right away. I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think going to the emergency room is the best thing to do when you're feeling suicidal. You don't need to be feeling suicidal. It's not a normal way to feel. It's not something you need to accept. It's not something you need to just bear and live with. It's not, in a way, it's not okay to be feeling that. It's not something you should have to feel. So what I'm doing, and what I did recently when I was suicidal, was I went to the hospital. I went to the ER, and then ended up in a psych hospital. And you know what? Of all the psych hospitals I've been to, this one sucked the most. It was a terrible psych hospital. It was. But I still think I did the right thing, because I got myself on some new drugs. I got myself in a somewhat safe environment. I got myself out of the location and away from the people who were causing me the kind of situational anger and towards self and others that I was feeling. So anyway, if you're still watching this video and you're feeling suicidal, please just go to the ER. Get yourself help. It's hard. I mean, you're in a really tough situation if you're in that situation, and I can relate to it. I've been there many times, and I'm at this point right now where I take it seriously. I call 911, or I get my relatives to drive me to the ER. They don't need to understand what's going on. They just need to know that I need help, and I'm going to get help when I need it.